Hey everyone. Yeah, thanks for coming onto this lightning lesson. The goal of this session really is to just learn from a couple of other consultants. I think a lot of the time I talk a lot about my advisory work and some of my consulting work, but I think a lot of folks are actually doing a lot closer to agency work and development work. And so I was really excited to bring in both Andy, who runs an agency, as well as Vignesh, who runs a solo practice, to come talk a little bit more about how consulting works for them. And I guess this is part of a series that I plan on running in the future, mostly focus on learning how to do like indie consulting. When I started out, I was just like eating shit for 9 months. And it was really helpful to get some books, meet some other people, figure out what's going on, especially around pricing and getting customers and all that. And I think I have a lot to learn from both Vignesh and Andy as well. So I'm excited to bring these two together. Vignesh worked at Drift and Kensho and recently has launched Nila, which is a consulting practice that he's run to work with startups to ship their like first couple of LLM features, I guess. And Andy co-founded Emerge Haus, which is more of a boutique agency. And I think those will really cover the basis of what people are thinking of doing with consulting. And I think all three of us represent a very different approach to how we tackle the same opportunity. Most of my background is actually machine learning research. And so these days, instead of doing implementation, I just help other software engineers think more like machine learning researchers. Whereas I think these agencies and these dev shops are definitely more in line with how to directly help the business deliver some kind of product. And so for both of you, what would be like the easiest way to introduce like what you do, who you serve, and what kind of problems each of you? Do you want to have Vignesh want to go first?
Yeah. So for me, I mostly focus on companies that have a platform already. They're a SaaS company, but they want to get more AI features into production. So I think companies are largely overthinking that process right now and taking too long to do it. My experience is all in product engineering. I'm a generalist at heart, so I help with that.
And what about you, Andy?
We believe every company has the opportunity to unlock pretty massive value with AI. So we're horizontally positioned. We form deep client partnerships to help rewire companies to move at the speed of AI. We offer consulting, development, and training, and we're working on a stealth product right now.
Nice. So you've already gone the route of like
Oh boy.
agency and just that. I'm really excited to talk a
We're
little bit more
exploring
about that. I think
for
Vignesh
sure.
and I have talked about the similar things as before. And I guess for me, most of what I've been doing is advisory work where there are many more software companies building software and products that are very probabilistic and very stochastic. And most of my experience in the past 9 years has been working with machine learning models and thinking about how do you build a roadmap, how do you research to motivate product. And so it's been a lot of advisory work. And then when I get tired of saying the same thing over and over again, then I build that into like infill products, whether that's course, whether that's company training, whether that's workshops. And that's been pretty fun for me. I guess I'm curious, Andy, like when did you leave the full-time role and go into things like consulting and agency work? I think you mentioned before you ran a dev shop prior.
So actually, I worked at a number of dev shops. I'd never run one. I was in leadership at a couple of different dev shops. But no, so I only got the AI bug before ChatGPT claim to fame, but not that far before ChatGPT. It was, I think, when GPT-3 came out with an API. So at the time I was still doing consulting. I was actually doing agile consulting for Caterpillar. And I kept that job. It was a contract, I should say, though, for I think like the first 9 months of starting Emerge House because just wasn't sure. It was nice to have a guaranteed mortgage pay. And then, yeah, then it took off from there and then eventually let go of it.
I see. And then Vignesh, I guess you had been for the most part joining, like working with startups almost to like the exit point. Like why didn't you join another startup versus doing your own thing?
Versus starting a company myself.
Yeah, or even just, yeah,
Like
exactly.
running a company. Yeah, I think starting a company is a fine option. I think there were just other priorities in my life that I wanted to do. And I think if you're going the venture backed route, you probably need to commit to 5 to 10 years of your life towards some specific thing that maybe one day I'll do that, but I just didn't have anything in mind for that. Also, like the other side of it for me is maybe ADHD, but I just love working on new problems all the time. So ideally multiple problems at the same time. Consulting really suits me that. I think the third reason is I think consulting is really interesting because you can price based on the actual value you're delivering. That keeps me going in some ways where I'm like, what's the most valuable things I can be working on? How can I help people the most? And the last piece is I just love owning the brand. So anything that I do, anything I'm writing, anyone I'm meeting, it's all tied to me versus me doing it for someone else I'm working for. So yeah, all those things have been really positive for me.
Totally. Yeah, I definitely align with I just want to work on every single vertical possible, right? It's like my goal is I want to have a client in healthcare, in logistics, in supply chain, in construction, oil and gas. And it's fun to be the one that says, okay, now that I've seen all these industries, this is the one nugget of truth, or this is the one correct thing I can make a bet on. I feel very confident in that. Whereas I think people who've been working very deep in a space that's moving very quickly, sometimes like things shift from under you, but just being able to see everything has been super, super helpful. I guess in that sense, most of the way that I've been scaling is scaling operations by supporting myself. But I think in Andy's case, it's about hiring a team and doing the delivery. So I'm really curious, was it just the case that you were doing development yourself and you decided to scale through building a team, or was that something you knew ahead of time? Because I think I'm considering it, but I don't know if Vignesh has the same perspective.
Yeah, I didn't. I guess maybe in the back of my mind, there was always a thought maybe it could turn into a kind of full-fledged agency. But really, what happened for me was I tried to build a SaaS company. It went exactly nowhere. Pivoted like 8 times, learned through every use case you can imagine under the sun. And what I ended up teaching myself was how to build with generative AI. And I remember thinking at the time, it wasn't even going to be that valuable of a skill set because it didn't feel like it was that hard. Like it took me like a few months to, okay, now I understand prompt engineering, RAG, this kind of stuff. Like probably every programmer is just going to pick this up, right? And then it turns out like, no, like most programmers just don't pick it up. For whatever reason, it still baffles me. So then after the SaaS company went nowhere, I decided, okay, I'll just see if I can sell my brain to clients. And so that started to work. And then I got the bright idea, like we were just on a project that just could obviously use another developer. I said, I can get another developer for you, charge a tiny bit of money on top of his time. And then I caught the bug. Oh, I could just scale that. And then I wouldn't have to do any programming at all and still make money. That sounds interesting. And it organically grew from there. I think having had a background in dev shops helped a lot because I just understood the right operational moves to be making in terms of pricing ourselves, doing contracts well, both in the execution and the framing contracts and things like that. And so, yeah, then we ended up scaling. And I would say working with the team is awesome. It's not for everybody. You have mouths to feed and a lot of responsibility. But on the other hand, you get to work with amazing people who now my team is definitely all better engineers than I am. And so it's really fascinating to just work with these people on a day-to-day basis. And then to also put together a leadership team that is focused on growing your business. It's really fulfilling.
Yeah. And I definitely feel some level of like intellectual loneliness where it's like, you have to be the person that's the smartest in the room and you have to be the person that's right all the time. And it's definitely, I think, a challenge. Like, what about you, Vignesh? I don't know. I think in the past we've talked about potentially growing a team, but even then.
Oh, I'm not interested in it at all. Yeah, I don't want to hire anyone. I don't. I think I'm not particularly interested. I've been a manager before. I ran a growth engineering team for a while. I think management is a lot of work. I think with AI tools, it's pretty incredible how much I'm able to get done on my own. That's been really powerful for me. I think I like guaranteeing the output of the work. Basically, if it's me, then there's no one else to blame. It's totally me. And I just try to keep the overhead as minimal as possible. I think like Jason and I have lots of conversations about the amount of overhead he actually has to manage. I have much less. Like my expenses are not very high. I don't have a lot of stuff that I have to deal with. So in terms of the question was like, how do I scale this? Like that's the question. Yeah. So I scale it by finding more valuable projects and more important problems, basically. So if I can find more expensive implementation work, basically just more problems that are hard to work on. And I've been taking on more advisory clients as well. So typically it's like I take an implementation. It always ends up taking 3 months of different projects for them to feel like it's in a good state. Then I transitioned over to advisory after that. I'm like experimenting with taking advisory up front, but I haven't been really. Yeah, that's how I scale it. I'm also not worried about, I like coding a lot. Like I love writing code. I love learning things. So it works. It's like my dream.
Yeah, interesting. Because I feel like on my end, because I've built out this brand, even if I hired somebody else, I think the client would still just be like, if it's 10 times wanted to talk to you, I'd rather just talk to you. You're like, oh man, I could never go on vacation. Like, Andy, like, has that happened to you before where it's, oh, I want to work directly with you? What is the language you use to get yourself out of that?
When I first started pitching projects, I was the only engineer. And so, yeah, it was always dealing with me directly. And then over time now, I'm not the main engineer. I'm like a CTO emeritus for a lot of our projects. And that's the vibe I get. It's more the relationships. Let's talk about the next tranche of work or whatever. And that's the kind of stuff that's very hard to hand off / you never really want to hand it off. Maybe obviously if you're going to grow to a certain scale today, as at this client on site, they're a large agency. They're $100 million professional services agency. The CEO of that company is not on every call. So it's possible to do. I think it's a ways off for us though. In the end, I don't mind. I think I'm different than Vignesh in that I was an okay engineer, but I was never a great engineer. And I really enjoyed the relationship aspect of it, leading people, that kind of stuff. That's actually more fun to me. I like meetings, which is which is good because if you look at my calendar, it's basically like nothing but 8 hours of meetings a day.
Oh my God.
I'm not even kidding you. I'm usually in 8 hours of meetings a day. So it's that kind of a pace for me, but I enjoy it. So it's all about, I think, figuring out what you really enjoy and then just pushing on that a lot.
Yeah. And I guess to talk a little bit more about the work as well, I'm curious for you, both of you actually, we all met in 2024, like mid 2024 when things were still slowly picking up. A lot of the clients I had were the ones that went viral. Now they have some ridiculous churn because the AI is not working and I'm coming in to upskill the team, hire. And that's what it has looked like in the past. Whereas now a lot of it has been just, we are a vertically integrated AI solution for a specific industry. These are the things we need to solve. I'm curious, how has the market changed in the past year or has it in your perspective? Are people asking for different things? Is it of a different scale? Is it a different size of company? Maybe Vignesh, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but mostly because your capacity has stayed the same.
Yeah, I think the big difference is probably last year, I had to do more convincing of people, it's not sales, but I had to convince people more about, hey, you probably should be doing more AI stuff. Or I think a lot of companies thought they could do it on their own. So they were just trying. They were like, I have 100 engineers. I can throw 5 of them on AI. And I think a combination of them realizing that those engineers didn't really ship anything, plus that if they didn't figure it out, they might die. I think that combination of things really hit for September, October. And then things have just blown up for me since then. Good. But it's really changed the conversation. I think now it's more, we really need to get some of these things out. We don't know which one to pick. We don't know how we can get it out quickly. I think architecting the right things, evaluating different options, and all of that has changed. Another huge part of it is companies are realizing it's very hard to hire for engineers or whatever you want to call it, applied AI engineers, whatever you want to call it, people that understand LLMs. It's very difficult to hire for. So more and more of my time has gone towards upskilling existing teams. So that's part of the stuff we did. We did a talk on how to use Cursor for staff engineers. That was a good example of the type of stuff that's going on too.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think hiring will always be a problem. And I think a lot of the consulting is the fact that we can de-risk hiring, we can de-risk the headcount and make better decisions on how people are spending their money. Andy, what were your thoughts on, I guess, how the customers have changed? I guess now that you're bigger as well, you probably take on larger customers and bigger enterprises. But
yeah, to echo Vignesh's point, I completely agree. The vibe has shifted from, is this AI thing really for us? Does it really work? To, okay, we know we need to do something with AI, but we're not sure what to do. Or I think I haven't personally run into this very much yet, but I think we will start to see it. And you guys probably run into this more, which is we have a project that's about halfway through and we're about to abandon it because it's not working. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't usually get those calls, but I think that's common in the market right now too. So the companies we work with, we pitch ourselves as AI transformation partners. So we're working with companies. We do work with some startups, but we're mostly working with companies like B2B companies between 100 million and a billion. They know they need to do something about AI. They want to move faster, grow top line, reduce costs, but they're not sure how. And so then we guide them through the process of figuring out what their potential use cases should be, where the ROI is, and helping them understand their cost to implement things, and then measuring the ROI on the back end.
Interesting. I guess this is the question that I want to ask you, Andy. First, what are the questions you ask as you're scoping out these engagements? I think because I'm the individual and usually I have like a push, I can just ask, hey, how much is it going to cost you to not solve this problem? What's at stake? And because most people have read my writing, they're very open to sharing some of this information.
Yes.
But it's not been the case for everyone that I've talked to. So I'm curious, how do you determine if they're a good customer, or just generally what are the questions, or what's the sort of sales conversation look like for a big agency?
Yeah. We treat it like a search problem. So when we go in, we're trying to find the needle in the haystack, which is what's a really high ROI use case that you have for AI. And we're looking amongst a large set of hay, right? Trying to find that needle. And so there's two strategies. One is breadth and the other is depth. So when we go in, sometimes we'll do a workshop and we'll actually do a little bit of education on what AI can do for a company. And then we'll ask, what do you think AI could do at your company? That tends to surface really good answers. And then we also go deep. We'll do some like deep dive interviews. Tell me with SMEs, tell me what your workflow is. What is a painful, urgent problem that you can't seem to solve right now? And what we found is clients who aren't very technical, when they get the AI bug, their eyes get really big and they get excited about what they can solve with AI, sometimes a little too excited, like they may have unrealistic expectations. But then it's our job in the sales motion to judo that energy of, wow, AI can solve all these problems let's channel that into a high ROI use case. And then when we do our sales process, we're typically looking at 3 to 5 different opportunities, and we just put it on a simple grid of what's the value impact here. So high, medium, low. What's the effort, high, medium, low, and is it technically feasible, go or no go? And then from that, we let the client green light the opportunities that make the most sense.
Got it. Yeah, Vignesh, I guess because I'm curious, as you transition from the implementation work to the advisory work, has the way that you've led these conversations also become very different?
In terms of like pricing or what?
Either pricing or just like how you decide whether they're a good customer and the kinds of questions you tend to ask.
Oh, yeah. So really most of the advisory work I have is people I already worked with for 2 or 3 months. So it's pretty smooth. It's just like, hey, you already have a baseline. I'll still be around to help architect things. I'll still look at data with you, still talk to the engineers, but you don't need me writing code as much. That's pretty easy shift. Most of the upfront work for me is on the sales side, but even that's not too bad because most of the work for me is a referral. So people I know I work with send me other stuff. It works fine because I don't need all the deal flow in the world. I get a lot through LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn a lot, so people send me stuff from that, but most of it is people I already know.
I see. As we go into the audience Q&A part, I'm just curious, is there a question you wish I asked? And do you want to go first? I don't know if anything jumps at you.
Yeah, trying to think from maybe something about operational excellence, or like how to architect the structure of a project to set it up for success. So to answer my own question, how do you set up a project for success? I would say like one of the most important skills to have is estimating, whether or not you're pricing based on how long you're going to work. Being able to correctly estimate how long it takes you to do something. Every client wants to know when's it going to be done. And it gives you the opportunity to set an expectation and then deliver against it. And so one of the things I would encourage people to look up is reference class forecasting. Basically what that says is, hey, instead of trying to estimate how long it's going to take you to do something based on chunk it out into buckets and put hours next to those buckets, which is how everybody does it. Instead, look at past projects you've done and how long those actually took you, and then base your estimates off of that. That just fundamentally shifts the way that you think about estimation and can help you really succeed in engagements where clients want to know, and usually clients want to know how long it'll take. And maybe let's see one other tip for success. Yeah, one last thing is meeting expectations for clients is fine, but it's a great way to lose contracts. What you need to be doing is exceeding expectations. And so I tell my team, your job is actually not, your number one job is not to achieve accuracy above X% or latency under Y. It is to delight your customers. And if you can figure that out, they will keep coming back to you with more work. They will refer you. And it's a game of constantly setting the bar low enough that you can jump over it in terms of expectations and then continuing to deliver. So that would be my 2 cents. Oh, you're on mute, Jason, I think. There we go.
Classic. I think to Vignesh's point that if you can do a very good job, referrals will generally be the easiest way of building any business and getting more customers. So Vignesh, like, yeah, what would be a question you wish I asked you?
I don't have a particular question that I could think of. I think to answer the operational excellence piece, I shift the focus on it. So it's less about when am I going to get this done? And it's more, when does the business need this? And for example, the typical way I operate, it's not like me and some isolation, right? It's me, 2 staff engineers from the company, 1 SRE, and the CTO, and that's it. That's like the Slack channel we're in. And we're all doing it together. Like I'm owning the net new stuff, but they're helping me a lot looking at data, this stuff. They honestly do take on a lot of the integration work, which is, as anyone here knows, like 80% of the work. As in, if you don't know the system, it's going to be hard to do that super well. So I typically have them help me with that. And that works out really well for me. I think the incentives are really aligned.
I see. Yeah. And I guess let me think of a question to ask myself as well. Actually, maybe I'll just skip to some of these questions too. I realized I don't even think of the question to ask myself. This is the difficulty of also emceeing this. Cool. Let's jump into some open Q&A. So if people see the Slido link, I'm just going to share it one more time. You can go on, vote for some of the questions you want to see answered, and then we'll go down some of them, and then I'll maybe do 5 or 6, and then we can do some live questions as well. I think a lot of what we talked about yesterday in the cohort was around like finding some kind of niche to tackle in the beginning. And one of the questions is about how do you balance specificity with flexibility in defining this niche? And how do you think about prioritizing the problems that you solve and the industries that you work with? I don't know if either of you identify with a niche, just because I think people know me as like the RAG guy. I'm curious, like, what does that look like for you in terms of defining a niche? Or is it just AI apps?
Yeah, I don't think I have a great niche. Maybe my niche is like ship things in 30 days guy. That could be my niche. Yeah, I don't think I have one. I worked in so many different industries. I like working on different things. Yeah.
Yeah, what about you, Andy?
It's funny, I was talking to the CEO of this $100 million professional services firm yesterday. And he was saying, yeah, we just really haven't found our niche. I'm like, you made it to 100 million. Like you got somewhere. So I don't know how important it is to find your niche, but it helps. It simplifies things in a lot of ways. And certainly if you do find a great niche that you love, you can really scale it. I would say maybe just more abstractly, there are a few different positionings that you can take. One, of course, horizontal. The other is vertical. Vertical meaning an industry, a specific NAICS code to get quite specific about it. So oil or gas and construction and so on. But I do think there's this kind of emerging space around what's sometimes called a functional vertical role or a functional horizontal role, but it really is just like a role. So like HR or finance or software engineering, right? Because a lot of AI agents are now being able to take on the jobs or the roles of folks at companies. So I do think that's an interesting way to position yourself if you were an indie consultant, is like really understanding all of the HR workflows and how that can work with AI. And I do think there's a lot of companies now looking for talent that can both understand a niche, like the domain, as well as AI. And so if you are an indie consultant who happens to have experience in like deep domain knowledge in something other than AI, I would say like leverage that to the max. It's something that whenever we go into an engagement in a new industry, that's exciting. We don't have experience in whatever construction. It's also a complete pain in the ass because now I have to put my brain into that world for months and try and understand all their workflows and whatever. So anyway, yeah. And in terms of like our niche, like I think we're trying to, short answer is I don't think we found it yet. I'll just say that we're horizontally positioned. We between 100 million and 1 billion seems to be our sweet spot in doing this AI transformation work. Insofar as that's a niche, I think it's quite broad, so it might really not be a niche, but that's our focus right now anyway.
Yeah, I guess the comment on Vignesh's point in terms of the niche is like, I guess you are a certain side of the company if it is the case that you have you and 2 staff engineers and the CTO that also hints at some scale of business, right? So we're definitely not doing jobs for McDonald's just because the sales process might be 9 months and we just can't afford to do that. But I guess in some ways that is a niche. I would say the thing that I discovered was because my background is in recommendations and search, RAG became the easiest thing to think about most of 2024. And then now in 2025, like I've even become more specific in the sense that a lot of these are vertically integrated companies that do like document search. So my relationships are with like the better databases and the PDF parsing libraries and those folks and understanding what is the economically valuable work. But now it's become a case where in terms of the deal flow, instead of having 6-10 people reach out every couple of months, it's 2 people that reach out, but you're pretty sure you're going to get those customers. But I can imagine if that changes somehow or the nature of the industry changes, things will still feel pretty different. This is a question that I think I really would love to answer, which is for digital presence, would you launch a solo consulting page and then pivot to an agency later or go straight to an agency if that is the goal? I will say now that I am solo, moving to any kind of agency that feels very weird. I don't know if I feel like going backwards might be easier of going from an agency and just being the principal engineer and always being the one that's delivering the work and then transitioning to a second person. I can imagine that's a little bit easier than being Jason Liu and then all of a sudden giving them a guy named John. That might look very different, but yeah, Vignesh, I know you operate under Nila versus just like having your own.
Yeah, honestly, the name was interesting because it didn't feel like I was doing real work until I had a name behind it. So that was my dad's advice. He just said, come up with a name and make an LLC for it. There's no tax benefits to making an LLC at all. There's no real reasoning behind it beyond having a brand. I do think it helped a lot from the sales cycle perspective. A separate landing page that's real.
Yeah.
That's been the main benefit for me.
Yeah.
I guess it opens the door if I ever want to. I'm still not super interested in hiring people, but if I ever want to like create other products, I think under that one umbrella, I think is a positive as well.
Makes a lot of sense.
I could see. My intuition was the other way or opposite from both of you guys. Like my intuition was, I just started as an indie consultant and then, because that's how I started. And then my sense was like with clients, they actually got excited about my journey. Oh, that's cool. You're hiring some more people or whatever. It was actually not weird to go from indie consultant to agency. And I do think there's this like funny period when you're super early days where if you try to position yourself as bigger than you are, it can feel inauthentic. And so that's tricky to watch out for. But I also hear what you guys are saying. And so I don't know, I don't feel strongly about my intuition going the other way, but
yeah, I definitely think it's funny that I'm legally the CEO of my company, but I would never tell anybody that because that just looks very immature in terms of the side of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah. This follow-up is an interesting question, which is what do you think is the minimum amount of professional experience to have before going full-time consulting? I personally might want to answer this first just because I think it's hard because really the thing you want to have is proof. It's almost like asking like, what's the best? It's like asking about credentials and which college you've gone to. And you can definitely do it without. It's just a matter of what is the size of the problem you're tackling, right? There are people making $1 million a year doing Zapier integrations and automations, right? And you could probably just figure that out and just charge very little and just do a couple of free jobs and get some proof. And maybe if you help a business owner with their automations, you can ask if they have anyone they can refer you to, and then you get the next job and the next job. I think it really depends on what kind of things you're promising and what kind of solutions you're promising. But I'm curious, Vignesh, I know you've been in like the startup space quite a while, but I don't know if you have a counterpoint to that.
Yeah, this works for me because I worked at companies that like exited, right? If I didn't, then I don't think that CTOs would listen to me at all. So I think that has been a big, and there's a lot of luck in that and all these things, right? I think it would be hard for me. Without that, I also was a generalist, so I worked on all parts of the stack. So with LLM problems, you have to understand product side, the scaling side, AWS. One day you just have to learn what SG Lang is versus the LLM to pick up things very quickly. So I think that helps me a lot. I have to train engineers. They have to listen to me. Like they have to actually trust me. If I didn't know what I was talking about, that would be a very difficult thing to do as well. I think the fact that I was basically a staff level engineer is really what's helping me now. But it's not to say that you don't need that. I think, like you said, there's a lot of things you can do, but I think for the type of work I'm doing, it would be very hard to do it if you were less than 5 years of experience, or really, honestly, probably 8.
Yeah, especially with the advisory work, I just find that if I get an email for some like 22-year-old, like how can I become an advisor and just get paid in on Zoom meetings? I don't know
and it's not
what
just
you
like
could say to them.
Yeah, it's not just age bias, right? It's more,
Yes.
it's more, what have you actually done? Can you actually prove it? I guess if you're 22 and you've built some massive thing for Coca-Cola and you deployed it, right? Then who am I to say you can't sell that to someone else? I think that's fine.
Yeah, my story, like I started with zero AI knowledge. I was previously a programmer, so there's that. But I never worked at a startup that was successful. I worked at like little agencies my whole career, and I am, I guess, where I am today. So it's possible. I think it all depends on your skill set. It's about staffing your weaknesses, right? If you want to go big and you're not good at something, if you can partner with somebody who's good at that thing, then great. Like now you can move on and go further. So it depends on like how fast you want to scale, how honest you can be with yourself about your weaknesses, and then how good you are at acquiring the talent to fill in those weaknesses.
Definitely. I think that's also the benefit of hiring versus just, again, like if you are the one-man army, you can go very fast, but there's probably some max distance that you can go. Like I would be surprised if there's anybody I know that can be like an individual person, even doing 10 million a year. It just feels very difficult. Whereas if you just have a couple of small operational stuff, you can probably get pretty far. Vignesh, I see you shrugging.
That's
today. Yes.
You don't know. I think if someone
me, Devin, and Kirsten will do $10 million.
I think also I'm like quite happy with the amount of money I make now. So it doesn't be, but I think it's more, if these tools are going to keep getting better, then I don't know if there is a limit anymore at some point. That's definitely part of it. If you want to know my limitation, I would say the issue is large companies, like Fortune 500 companies, would be quite hard for me to sell into unless I have, because they need a team. They like, no matter what, you just need like a team. They need a lot of case studies and proof and all these things. So I think that would be, it's still possible. I have friends doing this, but the sales cycles are quite hard, and I don't know if it's like what I want to be doing.
Yeah, I wonder if you can just pretend and act like you have a team and then just really have 10 versions of Cursor and a $6,000 Cursor bill.
I don't know. There's like a social contract at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
But I am interested in partnering with people like other independent, like Jason and I can projects together or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can work really well as well.
Yeah.
That's
I see that mostly as like a bundling plan versus a subcontractor kind of thing. But it's been very interesting. Think about what it looks
you're
like.
working with 567 and Nila and 3 other LLCs at this point. It is a little bit confusing, but
yeah. We're gonna rediscover bundling. It's definitely gonna happen at some point. Yeah, I guess there's a couple of questions I really want to ask actually, just because this one stuck out so much and it's something I've been actually thinking about. Once a consultant, never an employee again. Is this true? I want to hear Vignesh's answer first, and I can give mine. Once a consultant, never an employee again. Is this true?
Yeah, if you figure out how to do it, I think that's probably ideal. But not necessarily. If you, I would just say for me, I don't love working for someone, but I would do it if it was just like a really special opportunity. I think consulting helps you keep up with what's going on in the market. There's
Mhm.
probably at any given time like 5 to 10 very special companies in the startup
Yeah.
world join. And if you keep up with and you have a good brand, all the investors and all that, you have a chance to join them. So I think if something shows up and you just say, I think anyone here would have, if Windsurf was like, hey, you get 2% and 2 days later gets bought, I think people would do that. So those types of things probably exist in the world. But yeah, I really enjoy this. I like the independence of it. I like controlling what I put in, who I work with, who I spend my time with. So yeah, it would be very hard for me to join a job again.
Yeah. Andy, did you have a thought on this? Otherwise, I can shoot the answer.
I think Vignesh's answer was great. I don't have too much to add.
Yeah. I guess for me, just because I'm actually being pitched a couple of jobs right now where it is the case where the question really is, I run a business. There is some lifestyle that I have. And so there is some notion of a price performance, right? And there are plenty of companies where a small percentage of their vision is still bigger than like your business, right? And so I think that that's one angle, which is just like 2% of a company that is worth $1 billion is just more value than a single individual having a $1 million top line business. And then I think there's other questions. If you run an agency or the solo person, which is like, what does exit liquidity look like? There's no way I think Andy potentially could sell a business. I'm definitely never going to sell me because that's just called getting a job. But if you were offered some percentage of a business or offered some percentage of someone else's vision, the question is that actually bigger or smaller than what you have in mind for some like price performance?
That's
That's
true.
kind of been like the most realistic thing I've had.
The 2% is like almost like BP engineering level, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
if you look at it like the average like early engineer, if you're less than 5, 10 employees, is
Yeah.
1%. Realistically, if you're joining something at 20 to 50 employees, you're getting like
Yeah.
less. Do the math, guys. Like dilute it by
Yeah.
half. So just do the numbers before you join. Ask for the actual like total share count, all that.
Totally.
Yeah, I think maybe the deeper thing behind the question is, and I hate to use the term because it's overused right now, but it's agency, not starting an agency, but still agency. And I feel like when you go out on your own, whether that's as a consultant, a business owner, or whatever, you're either demonstrating existing agency or forcing yourself to get that agency. And once you become a higher agency person, you just have a lot more options. And I don't think locking yourself out of an opportunity because that's an employee makes much sense. But I also think it's going to be harder to go back into an environment where you can't be paid based on your ability to get shit done. And as a consultant, if you catch that agency bug, like that's something that you'll probably never let go of.
Yeah. I think it would be hard for me to want to join OpenAI as like a solutions engineer. I think that would be a very challenging role. Whereas
2%, maybe 2% of the OpenAI.
for 2%, I would probably be running the go-to-market team. I would run the go-to-market team. There's one company, for example, not famous, but everyone, including me, has I ghosted the CTO of Cursor in 2023. And that would have been like $100 million. I know someone who turned down 2.5% of Cursor. Ouch. Yeah. Can you imagine 2.5% of $9 billion? Whereas like there's been an opportunity recently that I've literally been thinking about where they were like, we need a head of AI. We're going to raise $100 million. If you join this, then your job is to spend $20 million. Whereas if I wanted to have access to that capital, I would not do it through running my agency because I simply don't have the revenue to hire certain kinds of talent. Like I cannot have a team of people where each person has a $250,000 comp. I just cannot afford that. And you would change the dynamics of the business of whether or not you would raise money. And so I still think end of the day, it's a question of like price performance. Just Instagram sold to Facebook, right? Kevin Systrom was a founder and became an employee. I think that's like a question. Those are like business outcomes. especially when it comes to agency, where Kevin at that point just said, I would have access to way more capital, way more infrastructure, way more hiring. We can do all these things. Cool. Let's do one question off the live. And then if anyone has like a live question, feel free to raise your hand and then we can jump in. I think we have 12 minutes left. What is one thing you wish more solo consultants knew about positioning themselves as a premium provider rather than some kind of commoditized service? I guess on my end, I just think it's easy to do it as an individual. Like an individual has the ability to have more of a presence than a commodity. And so there is an aspect of that, but I think there are limiting factors of scale when it comes to actually running the business. Andy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think however you are, or if the goal is to be brought in as an expert, what I've learned is it's much harder to capture that framing with the client if the legwork for positioning you as an expert has not been done before you start that relationship. And that could be in the form of a referral. Somebody talks you up and says, oh, this guy's great. You got to talk to them. That could be frankly, the school you went to on your resume or the startup you worked at that went public or whatever. Or it could be your content online where you're demonstrating expertise. But I think that's the key, because if you don't do that, there's no way to just appear as just another commoditized vendor who they can order around. And you don't want to be in that situation.
I think if you are doing work that they could hire someone full-time for, they're going to always choose someone full-time. That's just because then they basically control that person. They get the benefit of them sticking around longer term. So really, I try to find problems that are so pressing that they can't hire someone for. And I think like hourly there's an upper limit to it as well. So you can get 200, 250 an hour, all that. But for me, the things that worked are I try to help them find, they have to already know what expensive problems they have. Usually they have to know. For me, I go in, I help them pick one that's possible to fix. And then I pick a price that might be high, but I tell them that if I don't get it shipped in 30 days, they don't have to pay me. So that's the incentive alignment. I think that helps a lot.
I see. I guess on the topic of price, like one of the really great questions here was like, not necessarily tripling your prices, but what felt like the inflection point where the way that you were able to like bring in revenue or demand like higher fees, like what felt like that moment for you guys? Like for me, a lot of it was coming down to like my writing. I think most of my work in the beginning was referrals because it was very much, hey, Jason, our board of directors wants us to have an AI strategy. Like GPT 3 is a thing. Can you like talk to us and figure out what that means? And at some point it became, hey, Jason, I've seen a couple of your blog posts show up on my Slack. I don't really know who you are. I finally clicked the website and I realized you're available. So can we figure out if it makes sense to work together? And then I will share another blog post after the call. And like, turns out my CTO already read this. What is your availability? And that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, like I figured something out. It took 8 months to get there. I'm curious if like, Andy, you have a similar story or just what was the inflection point in terms of growing the business?
For me, and I don't know that this applies to everybody, but for me, it was hiring other people. Once I saw that I could charge Y to a client and pay a developer X, and if there was a delta between those things, it was like, that was the holy shit moment. And I just never had that experience before of it sounds gross, making money from other people's time. But what it really is like giving the opportunity for the business to grow based on that delta. And that was the huge unlock for me. So once I realized that, it allowed us to scale a lot faster.
Yeah. How about you, Vignesh?
I think for me was when I first got into this, I was taking not even AI work. It was just product engineering work. And I thought 150 an hour sounded good. And it was like a reasonable
Me
number.
too.
It was a reasonable number. And at the time I multiplied the hours out and I was like, I'm making more than I was full time. So fine, this is good. And then you just bump the numbers up a little while. Then I shifted from that to AI, and I like shifted the price back down to get clients. And I think the big thing for me was really like shifting to, there's this great article by Patrick McKenzie that I read on pricing. And it was basically like, you need to be finding like the most expensive problems you can. And it talks about how like, you basically can't charge hourly at some point. It's just not possible. You have to charge for value. So once I started, I just take a risk. Like I just started quoting based on projects, and it went very poorly for 3 or 4 projects at them. But I made it back. Basically, there was one month where I got a project and I finished it in a week or 2. And it was like more money than I had made if I had just worked full time, like hourly for a month and a half or something. Like it was just like this really pressing problem that came up. And I realized I'd rather sit there for 29 days a month and find a project-based thing that I could do for 1 day a month than work hourly. And that's what shifted it for me.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's almost like it's a bit of going from time-based to project-based pricing and then getting comfortable understanding the value that your project delivers and then trying to increase your fee to reflect the size of the problem. Yeah, like I definitely feel like when I started doing more advisory work, it was just like, what is my hourly rate? What am I worth to the customer? And at some point, it became the issue where when you ask the question of what is at stake, it's like, we're losing $300,000 a month. It's like, oh, okay. If I solve this for $180 an hour, I'm getting taken advantage of. Here's another story that was wild where there's one company was paying me $700 an hour to do job interviews for people to hire their head of AI. And by the time we had the offer go out, we had hired 3 engineers and the head of AI. And I had made $10,000 to $20,000. And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, all I had to do was just like read their resume, like log on, read the resume. Like, this is great. And then I was talking to the VP of engineering. They're like, man, this recruiter is so goddamn expensive. We paid out $220,000 for this recruiter to build out this team. And I was like, it's because the recruiter prices on value. The recruiter takes 20% of the compensation of every engineer. And I know every offer was $220,000 and the head of AI was like $280,000. And so they just took 20% of that. And I'm thinking they're going, oh man, like the reason the day the head of AI was like asking whether they should join, they were asking whether or not like Jason would stay on the project very long. Like you mentioned that like he saw me on a podcast. And I was like, I really messed up. Like I should have been trying to be more responsible for the team joining and the success of whether or not these people joined rather than the time. And at that point, I was like, $700 crazy. And at the end of it, I was like, wow, okay. So the company paid me 20 grand. The company allocated over $1 million of capital headcount. The recruiter made $200,000. And then they raised the Series B and the head of AI probably had their equity go up by $1 million. Like somehow I was the most exploited person in the room, but I was glad that I had tripled my hourly rate. And that was like a big wake up call in understanding like, okay, I need to really do a better job of understanding like what my customers' problems are. And I actually don't need to think about what I'm worth or what value I have as an individual or how good my skills are. And as long as I can demonstrate that I know what they want, you can do guarantees. Like for Vignesh's cases, if you just don't get the job done, don't pay me. Now it's been the case where it's, I'll help you build up the team. We wrap up when we build the team, but I want $80,000 to help you build this team. But I'm comparing it to your capital allocation. I'm comparing it to the fact that you'll be able to fundraise in the future. And once you do that, the numbers you throw out, you also just feel way better about it. If your friend just says, you should be charging more, just like triple it. You're like, oh, I'm going to make an enemy like immediately. And then you realize, and then you ask the question of, oh, how much do you think this is going to unlock for you? This is a $100 million problem for HubSpot. It's, oh, okay. So for half a basis point, you can have me for a whole year. This maybe feels fine. Now it's like the biggest unlock I had for value-based pricing. I know, Andy, you mentioned like the last time we talked, you mentioned like some directions around value-based pricing. I guess for the agent side of things, has it been like, how have you been exploring that or navigating that? I think for a larger company, it's also probably a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, although I still think it's the holy grail of agency sales is to do value-based pricing. We don't do it. We price time and materials. our hourly, I'll just say our hourly is 225. We're trying to probably pushing it 250, maybe north of there. And I like time and materials for a lot of reasons. One is that it makes it clear to the client what you're paying for is hours, not outcomes, which I know runs in the face of everything you just said. But here's the thing, like in generative AI, like we were taking on very large projects, like we're going to do this entire workflow or whatever. What ends up happening is it's scope creep, right? Constantly and all that kind of stuff. And so it just aligns you to where when the client asks for something else, you say, yeah, of course, great. We'll just deprioritize this other thing, or we'll add another engineer, whatever you need. And so we're just super flexible and easy to work with. Again, that being said, like I do think on some of our projects, I'd love to explore value-based pricing. I just hired a sales guy who's interested in it as well. We'll see. Talk to me in 6 months. Maybe we'll have cracked it.
I'm excited. Like, I think also, at least for Vignesh and I, we have so much shorter contracts.
Yeah.
And at least for me, like part of my point is that you should not need me because I will ideally have delivered your team. I should have hired the head of AI and done those final interviews, and you shouldn't need me. But as a result, I'm like also pricing on the fact that in 4 months you will be gone, and if you don't churn, this is not in alignment with your outcomes. I guess this is why the Vignesh you have like more of you transition to an advisor retainer model as well.
Right. Yeah, that's part of why I think that helps it too. I think hourly makes a lot of sense for something like an agency. I think outcomes is worth talking about too. You can't guarantee that anything is going to work, I think, typically when you ship something. So that's the thing, right? Like even, especially in LLM world, most of the things you ship are experiments. Like you don't eat really anything most of the time, unless it's like, hey, we're paying people to like manually transcribe these PDFs. If we can do this, we can save this money. Like that case, yes, I can believe that. If you're like, hey, there's this new product, we want to explore like this search idea. And I think like really what you're saying is it's worth $50K for us to see if it's possible. That's what they're really paying for. So the outcome you're delivering is them knowing that it works or not. That's the outcome. So if it works, that's great. I think that shift helps with value-based pricing a lot. Because sometimes we're like, what if it doesn't work? And I said, that's a different problem, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something we talked about yesterday in like day one cohort. Maybe it was with Brian. I don't recall. But like, it was the case that if they want me to, if you get to know the customer well enough, it's usually not the case that they need a model to go from like A to B performance, or at least that is something that is hard to pitch. Whereas if in my assessment of the business, it's really the case that the team has like tight deadlines on much more important work. And what you're asking me to do is de-risk research. De-risking research and seeing if a model is possible just has a different positioning versus Jason's job is to train a model that works. Because again, I'm trying to bring the conversation to what is the size of the team and how are you allocating your resources, rather than Jason's job is to build a model that's 6% better.
I feel like there's one very important point on pricing, which is that typically what companies actually want is they want you to say an hourly price so that if you get it, but they also want a cap. They want to know how much it's going to cost in the end. So they want both. It's probably going to be $50K, but it's going to be $200 an hour. So if you get it done in 10 hours, they only pay 10 times 200. But if it goes over, then like you said, it's going to be 50. So then I'm like, well, what was exactly the point of the hourly price?
Yeah.
No,
that's the worst of all possible consulting worlds. You don't want to end up in that situation. And companies will ask for it all the time.
Maybe Andy's much more estimating than I am in that way.
Well, what we do to push back on that, because it's a great point, Vidya. So we position ourselves as like an innovation team. I never use that terminology because that has baggage with it, but that is what it is. So we pitch you a team of one engineer, a PM, two engineers, a PM, data science, whatever you need, right? And then we try and position that as a year-long contract. And the way we go into companies is we say, look, this AI revolution thing is going to be playing out for at least the next 5 to 10 years. You guys are going to have a ton of AI stuff to do. Here's the things we recommend you do to position yourselves to compete and win in this space. You need a team that's executing on this the whole way through. And we'll start you off with, we ask for a minimum of 6 months. Sometimes they'll negotiate us down or whatever. And then we will still give you an estimate for how long it's going to take to do this first tranche of work you're really excited about. And that is whatever, 2 months or 4 months or whatever. and we'll keep track of that and whether we beat that. But also as we're going along, like you give us more priorities, we're shifting the estimate. So we try and play it that way so that they realize, hey, like they go into this the frame, we're going to be paying for this team for a long time. They're really our transformation partner. And now we're just down to, okay, what can we get done based on this estimate? But it's not a question of, okay, now we're going to stop paying you because you went past the original time frame you proposed. Because no matter how good you are at estimating, it always goes past the original time you proposed. So it's like unavoidable.
Especially I think because you're working with a team, it's also just hard to figure out what like the calculus of it all, I think is very difficult. Whereas I think at least for myself, I know that I feel very good with promising certain amounts of time just because the joke I've been telling for the past 2 years is every company's semantic search product was like my internship in 2015. So I've definitely just know the answers. Trust me, it's going to be fine. But the moment I have even one developer, like one day can easily become 2 days, right? And then in which case, because I'm busy that day, the review happens on the third day. And then you're like, oh my God, okay, this is very difficult to manage expectations there. I realize we've gone over. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I guess before we wrap up, do you guys have any closing thoughts, any call outs for other people who are like running agencies, thinking about starting, just any tips on getting started and things to watch out for before we sign off? Andy?
Oh boy, I have to go first. I was hoping to just run on Vignesh's coattails. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is it's all about breaking your context into the next level. Like when you started a job and you thought, oh gosh, I don't know if I could ever make it as a consultant. Like once you are in like a program like this, Jason, where you're around people and you realize, holy shit, this is really possible. That is a massive unlock. And then from there, if you want to start an agency or you want to start a product company, whatever it is, however your path is, there is just these cascading series of contexts you have to break yourself into. And it's always uncomfortable and it feels painful and risky. But I will say my biggest learning has just been to keep pushing, to keep growing. And even when it doesn't work the first time, if you just keep pulling the thread, it's surprising how far you can get. And so the world is your oyster, guys. Like we firmly believe that over the next 5 years, at least, there is at least $1 trillion of integration services on the table for companies to integrate AI into their offerings. And so the work is like literally falling off the trucks. It's out there to seize. Go seize it. Hit me up if you ever have any questions.
Awesome. Vignesh, I'll let you go first and I'll wrap up.
I think you better like sales. You better like marketing. You better like operation. You love taxes. You need to like going to conferences and meeting people. You need to like writing contracts. I'm telling you, that's the stuff that like takes up a lot of time. If you don't like it, then this is going to be a very draining job for you. If you love that stuff, I love all that stuff. So it works great. I find it very interesting. I'm an engineer, so that's very important to me. But if I didn't like all the rest of this, I don't know if I'd be any good at this stuff. So I think you talk about that a lot in your course because that's the actual focus. I think people don't understand how much of it is this other stuff. I had a good understanding of a lot of these other things because I worked at Drift and I met a lot of people working in other areas. But if you haven't seen that before, then it can be a little bit hard at first. That'd be mine.
I will say, I really recommend hiring an EA. What I realized was before getting an EA, it was me sleeping at 2 a.m. going, oh, I don't have the CEO's address. Let me send an email to ask the CEO for the address. So I can fill out this Dropbox form that I can then put into Dropbox signed and send over. And then you do a whole day of work and you're like, okay, they reply with the address. Let me go add this one thing, then send this back. And then if you have a good month, it just gets really overwhelming. And getting to a place where even just some operational help, I think is really helpful. Maybe Vignesh, you're just like, I'll do it myself. But
I think you can,
sleeping on time was very valuable for me.
You know how to do it. And I think you're still like, you're still responsible for it. If you have a job, you're like not responsible for any of this stuff.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah. And then I guess one call I'll make, just because I think for the most of my consulting time of the first year, there was a lot of feelings I had around like pricing and deservedness. And this is why half the material I do in the course is really just like getting over the mindset and how you think about pricing, where you're talking about how you're charging like more than your full-time job. But for the first year, I charged less money than my full-time job. So I was just like, it's a little bit different. Maybe I don't know as much, all this stuff. And the big unlock for me was that when you're doing this work, you must believe there is a price where both parties say thank you, right? That you are solving a problem that is so painful for you that they're happy to like compensate you and reward you for the work because they're getting something way better out, right? Like I say thank you to my EA all the time because now I get to spend a day a week like walking around in the park versus doing paperwork, right? But there also needs to be a price where like you say, I think oftentimes people ask, there's work the work is a little risky. Like, how do I price things well? And how much should I like guarantee? If I do a job for $5,000, I have to refund the money. It doesn't make me feel good. Like, if that's the case, chances are your guarantee does not align with the expected value of what you're asking for. If you ask for $60,000 and it doesn't work, you feel very incentivized to take that time, take that effort to make it work. Whereas if you charge 2, that guarantee doesn't feel good anymore. And I think if you do believe that there is a number where both people say thank you, I think it really unlocks a lot of your mindset on pricing. And that was the big thing that I think struggled with the most. Because I was a researcher for 7 years. I know the machine learning game, but just running a business was the hardest part. And yeah, this is all the stuff that we're talking about in the course. So I'll leave with that. I know we're like 10 minutes over. Andy, Vignesh, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
As always. And then we'll send some notes after this. We'll send some information. It'll include everyone's socials. And we'll send that email out. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reply. Feel free to DM any of us. I'm sure we're happy to respond. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.
See ya. Cheers.
Bye.